Hello and welcome back to the Poultry Network Podcast. I'm Tom Woolman and I'm joined this week by Jake Davis, Editor-in-Chief at Poultry Network. Hello, Jake.
Hello, Tom. Hello. How you doing?
I'm very well, very well. Yeah, the sun is shining on me today, but we haven't been seeing a lot of sun recently, which is all right. That's to be expected as autumn comes along. We're joined this week by Julian Sparrey, who is Group Technical Director of LiveTech, someone that a lot of people will be familiar with. So just want to say welcome, Jules.
Thank you. That's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
That's all right. And I was just noting that this isn't your first podcast appearance. You've got your own podcast going at LiveTech. Is that right?
We do, and if I can plug that one, my great colleague Jack Hughes is leading a series of podcasts really focused on biosecurity. So if you do have time after listening to the Poultry Network podcast, do pop over to the LiveTech podcast and learn a bit more about biosecurity.
Brilliant. Everyone has a podcast these days.
So maybe we could just start off, Julian, by just give us a quick overview of LiveTech, what the business does and the different areas that you're involved in.
So today, LiveTech is more about prevention of diseases than controlling them. So our history has been that we've been involved in controlling outbreaks of avian influenza within the country for the past 15 years. Not that we've had AI for the last 15 years, but that's what we've been building up to. We're a prime contractor to the government to deal with those. But our experience of those diseases and those outbreaks, and being on over nearly 300 farms dealing with that in the last 8 years, is to learn what happens when a disease is confirmed on a farm, what it means for the farmer, what it means for the business. And that's led us to building a much bigger portfolio of how to prevent those diseases, how to plan for those diseases, and how to get through it. So we like to talk of 4 Ps, if you like: prevention, protection, planning, and prediction. So our ultimate goal is how can we predict better? And I'll maybe talk about that a little bit later. We were going to talk about. But certainly preventing the disease coming in the first place is much better than having to deal with it when it gets there.
Because it's certainly been pretty worrying times, I'd say, for UK producers where, there's been a huge amount of cases, as you said, over the last, certainly if you go past, the last 5 years, really. I've been involved in a few myself, and it's all sorts of businesses which have experienced them. It's laying units, it's broiler units, it's broiler breeders, and even some of the primary breeders, have even had their own cases, which is, I guess, a bit of an indication as to how strong the viral challenge has been across the country. So maybe you've been doing some work, haven't you, looking at forecasting into what the next avian influenza season is going to have in store for us. I don't know, what are you seeing at the moment, and what are your thoughts?
Well, we were all getting very worried through June, July, when we were seeing a higher than usual number of cases in the summer. We would normally expect this virus to die out in the environment. With the temperatures, particularly the temperatures we had this summer, over 30 degrees for several days at a time, and that would normally have led us to think that it would kill the virus in the environment, which it potentially probably has. But what we suspect is that it has maintained a pool of virus within wild bird species. Again, we saw this 3 years ago when there was huge die-off in wild bird species around the coast, with breeding colonies of gannets and gulls and things that died, and they decimated those populations. Well, they seem to have recovered to an extent. Any inherent immunity won't last forever. It'll go through a couple of generations, but gradually those that survived will breed, and then we'll get more naive birds in. So potentially we are seeing more wild birds carrying the disease this summer. Through August, we experienced about 6 or 8 outbreaks with it, particularly in the pheasants down in the southwest. And also people were reporting to us, farmers, seeing dead gulls on farm as well. And now these aren't always reported. I know farmers are a bit reticent about reporting into APHA that they've got dead wild birds on site, but it's really important that you do this, because those are sentinels for where this disease is in the country. DEFRA publish wild bird findings, but it's only the tip of the iceberg. So birds that are reported in are just a small indicator of what the presence of that virus is in the wild bird population. But we're told it's going in a sort of a 3-year cycle. We're on the up again. Now, it doesn't appear that we're going to be quite as bad as 22, 23, where we suddenly got nearly 100 cases in October. But we're probably on a 2/3 trajectory of that. So the having spoken to vets, to APHA, to epidemiologists, the odds are this is going to be quite a heavy winter for AI. Although we're coming 2/3 of the way through September, and our last outbreak was at the end of August. So, as with every prediction, the most likely thing is it'll turn out to be wrong. But
I'm very conscious that we've got the same problem as various other programs that I could I quite enjoy drawing comparisons between this podcast and Have I Got News for You. But you can make a prediction, can't you, and record it, and then by the time that the program goes out, something completely different has happened. So, but that is the thing with AI, isn't it? Is you've got to really expect the unexpected. And as you say, as we were looking at the summer, thinking this could really kick off in September, and so far in September it hasn't necessarily kicked off in the way that we were expecting. But
these can be sort of affected by weather patterns as well. So we've suddenly gone into a bit of a wetter period. That may build up a bit more virus, which we'll see in 3 or 4 weeks' time coming through in infected cases. So there is always that delay between, birds may be carrying the virus, but they may not be transmitting it. It may take a change in the weather for that to happen. And certainly we're going to get inward migration soon. Again, that depends on weather patterns in Eastern Europe as to whether and how wild birds from the east come looking for warmer climates, and what diseases are those carrying. We are in LiveTech, we're looking at what cases are occurring in Europe. We look at the WOA data to see how whether there's any changes in the virus and things like that. So it's at this time of the year, the end of September, beginning of November, where we might get a slight variation in the virus coming into the country. At the moment, we're dealing with a virus that's been in the UK for a while in the resident population. But that sort of coming together of the resident population and the wild bird, the incoming migration in the autumn, that could cause a few changes as well. So again, it's all, in a way, it's all to play for. It's suspected to be a bit worse than last year and the year before, where we were really down low on cases. But from that point of view, we're ready. We're ready for it. From the LiveTech point of view, we've ramped up our capability. We're ready for the winter, whatever it throws at us.
That's what I was going to ask, and you sort of covered it. But I mean, I remember in previous years, it would seem like everyone was looking over to Europe to see how the spread of cases was coming along from Western Europe or from Eastern Europe through to Western. But I guess it's more like, as you say, it's more like we've got a domestic sort of virus circulating. And so the key, if we do think about migratory wild birds, we're not quite there yet. Is that the case? We've got a few more weeks before the real sort of movement happens, and we'll see the impact of that.
Yeah, it's normally towards the end of October. I always remember going on to half-term holidays in Northumberland, and you can see the geese starting to fly down the Northumberland coast, and you think, okay, incoming. But equally, organisations like RSPB and BTO will be monitoring these things, and they display a lot of data these days about migration and things like that. Which
I was going to say, I remember distinctly being on the site of an outbreak and literally standing there in the yard with geese flying overhead, thinking, yeah, this is a live situation. It's going on. Yeah.
So Not unrelated, but we were chatting before the podcast, Jules, about a project you're doing with some live gull tracking. Is that a good way to describe it?
So when we started looking at migration patterns and the fact that we've also got resident birds with disease as well, migration is a very broad brush treatment. I think it was back in 2006. They started publishing these flyway maps, very broad sort of brushes of where birds might come to. Well, roll on 20 years and actually people are tagging individual birds with GPS tags. So there are projects, conservation projects and all sorts. And this data is available now. And we've been looking at some of it and looking in particular at gull species that were, in this particular case study I'm thinking of, is they were tagged in on the coast of Holland in their breeding grounds about 3 or 4 years ago. And these tags have lasted for a very long time. And now there's probably about 60 or 70 birds left still flying with these on. And what amazed us was, whilst they are sat in a breeding colony for a couple of months, once they start ranging out to feed, they are coming across to the UK almost on a daily basis into the east of England and as far north as the Peak District. And then for a couple of months, they're foraging around and then they're heading back out again to the Dutch coast. And then for winter, they sort of head back down towards Spain and North Africa. And then they're flying back up again. But in real time, we can see where these birds are. And we had some outbreaks in end of July, August, and we could actually see these gulls flying across those outbreaks, heading towards Cambridgeshire and onwards to Staffordshire and things like this. So gulls do move on a daily basis a very long way. I think in the report that was written around that data, there was the maximum range they went was 300 kilometres, and a daily range was around 30 kilometres, and that is looking for food sources. They stay close together for certain months of the year, and they range for certain months of the year. And we're just starting to put that data up on our platform now for subscribed users anyway. And it's fascinating to see how it moves, but it is a snapshot because it's only 70 birds out of a million or 10 million or however many gulls there are in the country. But we know they are a carrier species. We know they are found dead on poultry farms. So they are a risk. And it's interesting to see at least the months in which they're fairly stationary and the months at which they're really ranging quite long distances. And they do they look for fresh water at night, and they'll roost on fresh water at night. And during the day, particularly now, they're looking for ploughed fields. They're looking for scavenging on tips. They'll sit on your roof looking for field eggs. They're looking for food all the time, and they'll eat anything. So it has been a really interesting exercise, and some of our clients will be getting that data very shortly, so they can make their own judgment on what it is. I say, we're not saying that those gulls are bringing the disease. What we're saying is they are moving disease around. They're a bridge species potentially between that. And it's been a really fascinating snapshot of what's happening. I think it relates. I'm just going on again now. I think it relates a little bit to people talking about the virus is blown on the wind. Well, in a way it is, but from my opinion, it's the birds that are going with the wind. A bird's not going to fly against the wind. And these birds are flying quite long distances each day. So if the wind's blowing to the northeast, they'll go to the northeast. If it's blowing to the southwest, they'll go to the southwest. So whilst it looks like the virus is blowing tens, hundreds of kilometres on the wind, I don't believe it is. I think it's the birds that are taking it because they're following the wind. It seems much more sensible from a physics point of view that's happening. And bringing that, and Jake, I think you mentioned it before, that viral pressure to certain locations in the country. So where we had those 2 outbreaks in Norfolk, a lot of viral pressure there, and it's just suddenly burst into the farms.
So, Julian, a couple of weeks ago on this podcast, we were speaking to a group of academics that were looking at resilience in the poultry meat sector, and resilience against disease outbreaks like avian influenza is a big part of that. You've been working very closely, haven't you, with government and with the industry over years of outbreaks. Do you think there are any things that we could do to make ourselves more resilient? whether at a farm level, but also, I guess, looking at the bigger picture as well in terms of the way that we deal with some of these outbreaks at a sort of national level and an operational level?
I think operationally, between the government, industry, people like LiveTech, we've exercised the outbreaks, the operations so much now. I mean, we've been involved in about 300. We know what we're doing. We know what to expect. APHA are working so much better than 5 years ago. But we've been through the mill to get there. The only way we get to this point is by repeatedly having outbreaks. But as we've seen in the last month or so, we get a positive finding, it's dealt with as fast as possible, and everyone tries to get back to business as usual as fast as possible. In fact, it hardly makes the press in a way these days because it's dealt with so well. Now, in terms of can we prevent more happening to be more resilient against getting the disease, there are still more things we can do. I think everybody is aware of endlessly being told to improve their biosecurity, and we have this thing, biosecurity fatigue, which we think is new. It's not. If you talk to Jean-Pierre Valcourt, he termed the phrase in 1999, biosecurity fatigue. We're always banging on about it, but we've seen that it's possibly infrastructure that we could really work on now, and we don't mean £20,000 worth of vehicle spray. It's shed maintenance. NFU just put out the building survey, looking at off the top of my head, I think it was 15% of housing over 50 years old. It doesn't mean to say those buildings are no good, because they've been renovated and made better all in those times. But where you may have a good building, you might not have a good curtilage. So if you've got muddy puddles around your farm, if you're not controlling drainage, then we know that water ingress is one of the big contributing factors to bringing pathogens into the house. And it may not even be AI, it could be salmonella, it could be anything. Rodent control, wild bird exclusion from your site. All these things are, to us, they're a summer job. We've had a beautiful summer. We could have all been out there fixing the roof on our poultry sheds, fixing the gutters, fixing the curtilage, so that we're less likely to bring contamination into the shed. And I think that's where, if we were going to invest, that's where we should be doing it.
The salmonella point is a very interesting point, actually, because you're right. An awful lot of the things that we've done and we've focused on because of avian influenza actually has also been pretty important in terms of maintaining our farms as being salmonella free, or reducing the risk and incursion of salmonella, which continues to be a threat with new and evolving types coming along all the time. So that's
definitely true. We saw a fall off because we only deal with salmonellas that are at the really bad end of stuff, where we have to remove a flock, unfortunately. But during the big years of AI, we had much less of that, and that, I believe, is because people were so concerned about their biosecurity that they were keeping other stuff out. And it's this time of the year that salmonella creeps up, because we're harvesting, we're moving rodents, we're spreading muck on the land, and that's bringing fomites closer to the sheds. And again, if you're getting rats and mice into your sheds now, you may not see them, but we all know they're there. So your pest control should be doubled down on in September and October, when cultivation is going on all around you.
I've just on the shed survey, I've pulled up some of the stats. 7% of used broiler houses have not had any major refurbishment since they were built at least 50 years ago. So, there's a not insignificant proportion who've never had any major refurbishment work. It's 15%, I think you were right, are at least 50 years of old. The average house is 31 years of age. The NFU's point was quite right. There's a big investment need there, isn't there, I think?
It is. Although it'll also be interesting to catch up with that survey, because certainly at the moment shed builders are extremely busy, aren't they? Trying to compensate for the shortage of space in both the egg sector and the meat sector. So I think that's a really interesting survey that the NFU are doing, and over a period of time, it'll be interesting to see how it sort of waxes and wanes in terms of the fortunes of the industry.
we'll have to get Amy and Tom on to have a chat about it. Perhaps that'd be a good step. I've got a couple of things I'd like to plug. One is there's a new EFSA toolkit, and we link to it on Poultry Network. It's fairly prominent on the site at the moment, and they've got some really nice infographics and things like that, and information in every language, every European language as well, which could be handy. So it's something to check out there. We also had Gordon Hickman from DEFRA speaking at Poultry Network Live a couple of weeks ago, and there's also a report on our website, a text report in the old-fashioned style, sort of covering what he said. Very similar sentiment, I think, to yours, Jules, today, that we may be in for a slightly tricky winter. And we also spoke to Wayne a few weeks ago on the podcast, Wayne Albinson at Lanix S, who went into a bit more detail about the cleaning, sort of the mechanics of cleaning sheds and things like that at turnaround. So a few bits and bobs to look at there if any of this has been of interest to you. And of course, the other thing to plug would be get in touch with LiveTech, because there's a huge amount of stuff that they do in that prevention space, as Jules said at the start. To get your business resilient. There's another thing we could plug, the Try Some Chicken project, because we spoke to those last week. But Jules, if you want to give a quick overview of how you might help farm businesses, that might be helpful as well.
Well, I think one of the things that just in a way cropped into my head there is if you are planning a new building, or if you are refurbishing, and then get some advice on how to build in biosecurity to the building rather than add it on later. We've seen too many. I know we're driven by the planners so much as to how these sheds are sited, but if you build the shed and then put the facilities at the far corner, not by the gate and things like that, it's looking at traffic flow, people flow. That's one of the essential aspects of designing the site, so that you can minimize the requirement for anybody to come into the biosecure area of that site. So putting, drop-off points, delivery points on the edge, making sure people don't have to drive all the way through the farm to find the office. So if you are putting up a new shed, or if you're refurbishing a shed, do get in touch with LiveTech, and we can give you some pointers on some of the essential bits of infrastructure that can really help in maintaining biosecure premises.
Brilliant. Well, I guess that just remains for me to say thank you ever so much for speaking to us today, Julian. No doubt we'll keep in touch as the winter progresses, and as we see what avian influenza has got in store for us this week. But yeah, thank you very much for coming on.
No, it's a pleasure. And I should have probably said, download the free app on your phone, and it gives you all the outbreak data, all the wild bird data to look at for free, located to your farm.
Brilliant. That sounds very interesting.
Thank you.